I'm Jason Pack.
And I'm Alex Hall.
And this is Disorder,
the podcast where we try to make sense of our mad world. And today, even more mad.
Yeah, it's a mad world out there, Alex. And we're speaking 2 days after the assassination attempt on President Trump at one of his rallies in Pennsylvania. Is it that surprising? No. Is it shocking? Yes, completely. Is it going to be one of those pivotal moments that go down in history? Probably. Where were you, Alex, and what were your immediate reactions when you heard the news?
I mean, I'm still, I must confess, in a state of shock. I mean, we've got very used to this hyperbolic rhetoric, and the language has been getting hotter and hotter in this election campaign. But to me, this was still surprising. And this has sort of completely upended the narrative and the trend of the race. So where was I? I was in the countryside in Virginia, attending a baseball tournament with my son, and I got a text saying, Trump's been shot. And so I immediately went, of course, to Twitter and saw the most shocking scenes. And now we've all seen the photos and the stills with the American flag behind him, the blue sky, surrounded by Secret Service men and women, and Trump pumping his fist and shouting, fight, apparently unbowed and defiant. And I have to say, I give him full kudos for that moment, that he wasn't cowering, he wasn't frightened. That was just raw animal instinct to pump his fist. And, they often say that a bully in practice is a coward. But Trump emerges from this looking very strong. So that's where I was. And I think it's like those moments, where were you when JFK was assassinated, or where did you hear the news? I think this is going to be one of those moments. But what do you think, Jason? Where were you?
Well, I was in Saltsjoboden in the Swedish archipelago at a backgammon tournament. The news came in the night of Saturday, late evening. I didn't catch it until Sunday early morning. And it was fascinating to be among the backgammon guys. I'm going to come back to their unique insights into things. But our politics has become imperial and almost theocratic between warring tribes. And traditionally, assassinations of religious leaders and kings and messiahs has been the only way that you could get them out of office. So that feels very normal given the extreme polarization and dynastic nature that we now have in our politics. When you talked about Trump's animal instinct there, I hate it. I hate the fact that he came up from having blood on his ear and the first thing he said was, fight. This might work if you were a warlord in the Middle Ages leading your principality against the neighboring dukedom. That's where he's at. He is essentially a very vigorous, for his age and his health, warlord. And I can't even imagine what that says about him, because this puts him, really in the perspective of being like a Mussolini fascist energy kind of figure. This is not scripted. He just responded that way naturally, Alex.
No, exactly. I'm not saying I necessarily liked it. It's just that he came up and he just looked as mad as hell. And he does. He has a very atavistic, raw instinct. I mean, there were a couple of things that really shocked me about this. One, the sort of shocking number of people who within minutes of it happening were saying, oh, it was immediately staged. And that sort of, immediate assumption, conspiracy theorists. I don't think this was staged. And then the second thing was that this was his instinct to come up, sort of pumping his fist. I mean, none of us know how we're going to react in those moments. And that was his instinct. It shows exactly his instincts are those of a warlord. And while it might not appeal to you and me, it's massively appealing to a lot of people out there. It conveys strength, it conveys vigor. And it conveys this amazing sort of fighting instinct. And it's an iconic image. I mean, it was like a replica of the Iwo Jima raising of the American flag in the Second World War. It's quite astonishing. And I think it will appear.
Oh, wow.
I mean, there are already T-shirts being sold on this.
I think you give him a bit too much credit there. I respect the man. I'm obviously much more of a coward than him. I couldn't have emerged in that way. And he obviously has a lot of fight in him and a lot of courage. So, I say hats off to him for all of that. But Iwo Jima was the conquering with so much blood, sweat, and tears of this atoll in the Pacific. I don't know what he's conquered other than this narrative that he's some kind of messianic hero or he's a martyr and the establishment is out to get him, and yet he stood up against the corrupt establishment. Yes, this so much plays into his own narrative of being a targeted outsider. It's almost crazy the extent to which the timing and everything about it plays into this. But I'm going to tell you the way in which people at the backgammon tournament responded. It's important to keep in mind that they're almost all Europeans, some Japanese, but mostly Europeans. And everyone said, oh, as soon as I heard the news, I knew he was going to win the election. Obviously, this will enormously improve his popularity. And then you talk to someone from a country like Austria, where they're not really particularly involved, who doesn't speak English well, and they're like, yeah, he has a lot of vigor. It's going to be incredibly difficult for Biden to, compete against that. And then the fascinating bit for me was everyone was quoting the betting markets, which is that when it was known that he only had a minor flesh wound in his ear, the betting markets on Trump shot up. He has become a prohibitive favorite. If he was a 60-40 favorite after the debate, he's raced into 70+% to be president. And the gambling guys say that they think that the markets are correct. I mean, my response was, how do people know? Because all the Trump voters are already going to vote Trump. The debate already happened. How can this change things that much? But hundreds of millions of pounds have changed hands in 2 days on the betting markets on this question. So if the smart money is moving in that direction, it's very, very scary because people may understand certain things about human psychology.
The minute I was actually able to see the video and see that he was okay and him pumping his fist, I knew the election was gone. I mean, basically, I knew it's his to lose now. He was already in the lead. And the memes and the images and the commentary about, Marco Rubio immediately posted this sort of nauseating tweet that God saved him, which is just ridiculous. All Trump has to do is not screw up between now and November. And he needs to not screw up by not escalating the rhetoric himself. He can pivot and suddenly say, this is a moment for unity. I mean, he can rise above the fray, which is not his normal instinct, but already his posts on Truth Social have been, we must unite, we're a great country. My sympathy goes to the injured. He's already announced that he's going to go to the funeral of the firefighter who tragically was killed, protecting his wife and kids, who's also a hero. They've now invited Nikki Haley to address the convention. She wasn't originally due to speak at the convention, and now she can be there and say, we must unite behind Trump. If they play it like that, it swings so decisively in their favor. Democrats have one last roll of the dice, which is to ask Biden to step aside and put in somebody completely different. That is their other roll of the dice they have. I personally think that this is their last chance to shake up the race. And I was going to ask you, do you think what's happened makes it more likely Biden stays in, or he has to step aside?
It's absolutely essential that he steps aside. I think it only makes it more likely that he stays in for the next few days. He can't step down just now because the news cycle is on this and he needs to try to reassure the country or whatever, but he's got to step down before the convention. And you know that something has gone wrong when you're the president of the United States and you have to be having a public feud with George Clooney. If you're a Democratic president, you don't want to have a feud with George Clooney publicly. So as soon as that's happening, he's going to have to step aside. Other mega donors are going to line up. You're right that we may lose a precious week and a half because the impact that this is going to have on the news cycle and the need for the Democrats to pull their negative campaign ads on Trump and to not paint him as a threat to American democracy publicly, because it could be said that that kind of rhetoric led to this assassination attempt. I think, though, that it makes it all the more clear that Biden has been overmatched by Trump in the head-to-head horse racy aspects of things. So he needs to be pulled. And the coach is going to come to him, and that's going to be Nancy Pelosi and Obama and Clooney and hopefully Jill Biden and others. And they're just going to pull him. So I think that there's just a slight delay. If we can't get on the Ohio ballots, we can't get on the Ohio ballots. We probably weren't going to win Ohio anyway. Many presidential campaigns, certainly before 1865, were run whereby the victorious president didn't run in all the states. Do you know what I mean? You don't need to run in all the states. You need to run in enough states to get 271 electoral college votes. The rest is like absolutely irrelevant. So we got to respect the process, but we have to also not do just conventional thinking. I want to get back to the narrative questions, though. Trump has always been a messianic figure to his supporters. For those of us who are not supporters, we may not understand how they see themselves as embattled. They see the mainstream media, the elites, as people who are never letting them express their opinions. You know, I can't say that I don't like transgendered bathrooms. I'm not allowed, you know what I mean? All of the agency, it's the elites who control all this stuff. But this man, he stands up for me. He's struggled against them. One of the things, if you look into canonization of saints and religious leaders, they all face adversity. They're rejected by the people. And then they survive death, or they survive some kind of trial, whether it's like they were crucified and then resurrected, or they are having to have a battle against evil and they're victorious in the battle against evil. There's something evolutionary that we grasp onto. This man or woman survived this challenge. They must have something special, something which is supernatural. And you can understand this instinct. You would want someone to lead your community into battle who had been victorious in previous battles and had survived death. So that it's a great calling card, you know. An arrow hit him and he didn't die. Great, that's our general. It will be challenging to disentangle the evolutionary response on behalf of people, to deify him, to make a hagiography into a narrative of everything that's happened to him.
But can I just jump in here? I mean, first of all, yes, of course, I agree with you about Trump as the sort of messiah and sort of playing up his character. And another aspect of that, which Nigel Farage has channeled in the UK as well, and the Brexiteers channeled, which is that somehow their kind of raw language is authentic and that they represent the real people, as if people who don't vote for them aren't actually real people. So Trump does that as well. He's channeling the expressions of ordinary people. However, I do think you're making too much of a generalization about people who might choose to vote for Donald Trump, as if they're all just sort of held in thrall by some, 17th century mystic, and none of them are capable of intelligent thought. I mean, there is a narrative that quite a lot of people who don't like the personality of Trump and wish he would tone things down, nevertheless genuinely don't like the direction of the country under the Democrats. And Joe Biden last week, he was going on in his press conference about how successful the economy is. And that is really tone deaf to people in hard scrabble places in Ohio and Pennsylvania who've seen their steel mills close, the old working class jobs go away, inflation rise, and they don't feel well off. And they look at the American withdrawal from Afghanistan and they see weakness. They look at war in the Middle East and in Europe and they see insecurity. And so we can debate, and you and I can argue about the extent to which that's Biden's fault, or whether actually, thank goodness, we have him in charge to handle these crises. To imply that so many voters are just voting for Trump because they're all sort of stupid is precisely the kind of condescension that makes people want to vote for Trump. Some of them genuinely don't like Biden. And we need to recognize that. And until Democrats recognize that, we're going to have a problem.
But now I see policies almost completely irrelevant. It's about two different narratives. There's the narrative of the neo-populist right that it's in a global struggle and it's embattled and it has righteousness and that it's facing, the woke, homosexual, Muslim, globalist elite. And I know that oversimplifies things for how a lot of Republicans may just choose to vote for lower taxes. But I think with these heroic events afoot, this narrative is more important, no?
I do, but those cultural wars for some people are the policies, like transgender bathrooms or the policy on abortion. For some people, those are the result of policy choices and they don't like them. So again, I'm not saying I agree with all those assessments, but I think we have to recognize that, some of these voters are voting out of conviction. They're just not convictions that we share. And we're living in this maybe takes us back to the sort of the wider themes that you're keen to explore and we should explore in this, which is we're at a time when people live in very different cultural and political spheres. And it's not just a matter of how we tweak taxes or how we tweak minor issues. These have become major divisive issues, and people are living in two different realities.
I'm going to disagree agreeably that it's about policy. It isn't really about policy. I think that those debates, even the people who say that, I don't like the direction the country is going in, it's about a narrative struggle. I see American governance right now as more akin to a theocracy or a kingship, where there's a cultic leader or a king, and people have perceived that he can only be removed via violence. And an attempt to kill him, therefore, if it succeeds, it removes him. But if it fails, it increases the legend of his invincibility, his righteousness, his charismatic power. Very few people are going to be indifferent between the two candidates or options and are going to choose based on one policy. Oh, I like this because he's going to be incentivizing small businesses with a certain kind of loan, so I'm switching my vote. No, we're just now about these two different narratives. The Trumpian messianic narrative of saving the country from the elites and globalization and the woke left, and then the Democrat Biden narrative of saving democracy from neo-populism and a Trumpian family mafia takeover. These narratives are going to compete in a quasi-religious sphere to mobilize people and then come to be the dominant hegemonic narrative. And I just see this as quite similar to developments that we see in the non-democratic world and how they deal with their politics. We in America now are exhibiting signs that are quite similar to non-democratic societies. No civilized society can have this many guns in action where people can simply try to use guns to affect political outcomes.
Well, I have a follow-up question for you, but on the gun issue, I don't think it's going to lead to any more action against guns. Unlike almost any other Western or democracy where an attack like this would immediately lead to a debate on guns, I don't think that's going to happen. But can I ask you a follow-up question? So Donald Trump is the Messiah. He's being built up in this way. But do you blame the Democrats for fueling that narrative by making their campaign so much about Trump and all the lawsuits against him, that they have sort of fueled that narrative that he is uniquely dangerous, that he is, this sort of almighty figure that they need to take down. I mean, in retrospect, were the Democrats wrong to campaign in this way?
It's a complicated question. The problem is with Trump himself as a person. It's not with Republican Party policies. It's about Trump's unique disregard for democratic niceties, for institutional procedures, about the fact that he is a convicted felon and an insurrectionist and someone who tried to get Georgia election officials to, quote unquote, find him 11,400 votes. So the problem is that they've prosecuted that case incorrectly. They haven't made it so clear why he in specific is not a part of the American tradition. Political assassinations are a part of the American tradition. It's not just Lincoln and JFK. TR escaped an assassination attempt. FDR escaped an assassination attempt. Ronald Reagan was shot at. Herbert Walker Bush was shot at. And we just have had this every 20 years. Obviously, McKinley and Garfield were killed while in office because we've always had guns in our society and we've had a degree of kind of anarcho-capitalism going back to the 1880s. We differ from Europe. We have obviously not just more guns in society, but we have a different political process whereby people have their say, not only via primaries and conventions and how they respond to the debates, but through their own activism to create local associations, to donate, and then occasionally to use political violence to affect the election. History would tell us that when you go for the king, if you miss, you're in trouble. And that has been the case with Reagan, with Theodore Roosevelt. You're thinking that the Dems can go back to their campaign as usual and negatively attack Trump and make the election about him, or that now they have to entirely pivot and sell their case to the American people differently?
I think they're in a really hard situation. I mean, I asked you, are the Democrats guilty of having run this campaign badly by making it so much about Trump? On the other hand, it kind of is about Trump. He is uniquely different from previous Republican candidates. And he does potentially pose a threat to democracy. And his rhetoric is also guilty for leading us to this point. And the way he's appointed judges, by the way, another Trump-appointed judge just threw out the case against him about classified documents on the grounds that the special prosecutor wasn't appointed correctly. So that's yet another court case that Trump has seen off. So we are in a very dangerous moment. So the Democrats have a very sort of difficult balancing act, because I think it is important that the case is made for why Trump is uniquely dangerous, because he is uniquely dangerous. However, if they continue to make it about Trump, they fuel the narrative that they are guilty of whipping up this personalized hatred. So I think the only thing they can do is change the messenger. They do have to keep making the case about the manifold challenges that a Trump presidency would case and why would present and why Trump is such a danger. But it can't be Joe Biden to make it. He wasn't an effective spokesperson already. He wasn't landing those points effectively. I think they have to find a different standard bearer. And it has to be somebody, I mean, I know this sounds a bit silly, but a woman making those cases is less inflammatory than a sort of angry old man making those points. And so I feel it makes the case for a different kind of candidate, one who makes those cases not in a punchy, aggressive way, but in a soft-spoken, quietly effective way. So they have to nuance the message and they have to change the messenger. I feel that's their last chance to change the dynamics, which are going very much against them at the moment.
After the break, is there any way to pivot towards a more ordered world?
I'm John Prideaux, US editor at The Economist, and the question I get asked the most is this: why are two old, unpopular men running for president again? The answer lies in the story of Joe Biden and Donald Trump's generation. As the boomers near the end of their political journey, I'm setting out to make sense of their inheritance and their legacy. I'll reveal the mindset of a generation during 6 crucial years. Listen now to Boom from The Economist, wherever you get your podcasts.
Alex, it's been great to chat through this momentous event with you and share our recollections of that moment. I will, of course, always remember the moment of receiving this text. There had been an assassination attempt on Trump. I'd like to believe it's always darkest before the dawn, and that although there could be a lower point than this, why not use this rock bottom and say, partisanship and divisiveness have gotten too bad. We can't live in an uncivilized society anymore. Biden just says, I'm going to bow out. I want to have a national unity ticket. We're going to have an anti-Trump Republican like a Kinzinger or a Liz Cheney or Kasich as the vice presidential candidate. And we're putting up a very centrist governor like Amy Klobuchar or something like this. He's not going to do it probably, but there is an opportunity to seize order from the grips of disorder and to use this moment to have a conversation about gun control and civility in public life and probably mental health. I guess my ordering the disorder suggestion is, why not announce a presidential initiative on mental health, that $100 billion will go to, free psychiatric care and mental health awareness.
I would love to think that saner heads, both on the left and on the right, prevail, that Donald Trump seizes the moment to change completely the tone of this convention. And apparently there's already been some efforts to do that. 2 of his campaign managers have sent messages out to speakers and to the party faithful saying they need to dial down the rhetoric and criticizing tweets saying this is all Biden's fault. There's already been a bit of pulling back on that, which I think is encouraging. Even if that's just for showmen, which that's just smart politics, but it doesn't matter. It's still a good thing. And then on the Democrat side, yes, you're definitely right. It's a moment where Biden could finally fulfill that father of the nation role and actually use it as a hook for him to step down without appearing to lose face. It would actually be quite a good sort of way out for him. Whether they would choose a bipartisan ticket, I personally find that quite hard to believe, because the Democrat Party has its own very strong left wing who would find it extremely difficult to work with someone from the other side. I mean, I remember John McCain really wanted to have as his vice president Democrat Senator Joe Lieberman, and it was his own party who said, you absolutely can't do that. You just can't.
He probably would have won the election,
Yeah,
too.
he would have done. Well, maybe not. Obama was a unique candidate. But I think for the Democrats, there will be those who will find it very hard to work with Republicans. Then I also think you've got surrogates on both wings of the party who nevertheless will still finger point and say it's all your fault.
Just to order the disorder and wrap up, these are very disordered and chaotic times, but we're happy to order the disorder with you. There's so much chaos out there. Maybe this is a new bottom and it can only get better. Maybe this is not a bottom and it can only get worse. You'll have to tune in next week to find out. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to our Substack, where we have more curated and interesting background information.
As you said, Jason, it's not over till it's over. I suspect there will still be many twists and turns to come. Thank you for listening to us. Please follow us wherever you get your podcasts. All that remains is for us to thank our producer, George McDonough, and our executive producer, Neil Fern, and to sign off wishing you all a very orderly and peaceful week.
Stay safe out there, mega orderers.
Bye.
I'm John Prideaux, US editor at The Economist, and the question I get asked the most is this: why are two old, unpopular men running for president again? The answer lies in the story of Joe Biden and Donald Trump's generation. As the boomers near the end of their political journey, I'm setting out to make sense of their inheritance and their legacy. I'll reveal the mindset of a generation during 6 crucial years. Listen now to Boom from The Economist, wherever you get your podcasts.